now we're going to be making the solid panels for the pad. First thing we want to do is double check and make sure that these pieces of plywood measure out to 10 7/8 by 10 7/8. So we use a tape measure here, and this side measures out right, and we want to measure actually on both ends of one side. So this measures out right, and then we measure this side, that measures, and this one measures fine too. This one is a little bit long on that edge and on this edge. So I'm going to use my surf form here and cut this edge down. Okay, now we're going to be making the solid panels. The first thing we need to do is drill the holes in the corners to guide our screws for the corners. For this part we're going to need a pin to mark where we're going to drill, corner braces to help us find out where we need to drill, 1/8 inch drill bit to drill those holes, and we're going to need the sheet metal eventually to wrap around the panel, and the pan Phillips screws to hold the sheet metal down, as well as eventually bolt it down into the pad base. Okay, so first thing we do here is put the corner brace down and mark right on the edge there, on the inside of that circle. And we do that on all sides. If you notice on the arcade pads, the screws for these panels are all kind of further in on one side than the other side. So that's what I'm going to make it look like here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is use a ruler, and I want to make this, aside from how far in this way it makes it, okay, when you mark these, the wood is going to absorb it a little bit and spread it out over an area. So you're just going to have to make a guesstimate when you start drilling. Just get it as close as you can. Okay, you'll notice here I made kind of an angle. The very corner of that angle is where I'm going to be drilling. I have it for all four sides there. So what I was talking about earlier, there's more space here than there is here. And on the arcade pads, that's how the screws are. They're closer to that edge than they are to these edges. Okay, just about to drill these corners, but before you do that, I put some junk wood down here. This is just scrap wood that I'm going to be using the drill on. You don't want to put anything down here that you're going to use during the course of building this pad. Okay, so first we're going to drill this hole here. You want to get it as straight down as possible. On my drill here I have a little bubble thing that I can line it up. Okay, so you're going to drill all 5 of these panels just like this one. after we have all the holes drilled in the plywood, we're going to attach that to the sheet metal. So we want to put them on top of each other and line it up really good so that you've got about an even amount on all sides of the sheet metal. And we're going to take the same drill and drill bit and put one hole through the sheet metal on one of the corners. And I'll put my elbow here to put a little pressure just to make sure that it won't move as I'm drilling. So now we're going to put this screw in. And now the sheet metal won't move, so we can drill both the other corners through the sheet metal and secure those. Okay, so I've drilled the last two holes, and now I'm just going to put the last two screws in. Now we have all the screws attached, and I'm going to cut the corners off of each corner, and then use the rubber mallet to bend the edges down. So just cut into the edge and cut into the edge again. Be a little careful because these edges will kind of fly off when you cut them. You can hold on to it when you cut it. Make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, now we have all the corners cut, and I'm going to use the rubber mallet to fold the edges over. I start out with little taps just to get a bent edge, and then I really start hitting it. Okay, I've bent the edges in on all sides of this panel. You might notice that it's not totally flush up against the side here. If you are a perfectionist, you could unscrew all the screws here and make sure that it is at 90-degree angles and then put it back on, but it's not really needed. Okay. Now that we've finished one panel, you need to go ahead and finish the other four. So we have 5 panels, and then we can go ahead and finish the base of the pad. Okay, now we've built all 5 of the solid panels. We've got screws kind of halfway through them, just so they're not showing at the back end. We are now going to construct the base of the pad. There are going to be 2x4s going across there, here, here, and up here. Now, we still need a place for the wires to go through. So if this is going to be the top of the pad, you're going to have a hole at the top here for the controller wire coming out, and then you're going to have a hole here to have the wires come underneath and out to each arrow panel, and then again straight through underneath here to come to the bottom arrow panel. So we are going to take a 1/2-inch drill bit and go through these panels. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is going to mark the section where we're going to drill the hole through. This is the piece that actually is going to go about here on the pad, and this one's going to go here. The top one we're going to want to drill approximately here, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark it. And then this one and this bottom one here, we want to drill pretty much right in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just going to mark a line for each one of these, and then we'll drill. Okay, what I have here is a 1/2 inch drill bit, and we're going to put it right here in the center and go straight down. I'll put these two pieces of blocks of wood here so that when I drill down through, I'm not going to actually hit the plywood that I'm going to be using as the base of the pad. So just kind of try to get center. When you start getting closer to coming through the bottom side, you might want to put the piece of wood actually over top one of the pieces you're drilling on so that it doesn't crack the wood as it comes through the other side as much. Now it's through. Yeah. Okay, see, we have a little bit of splintering on the side here, but if I was not on top of this piece of wood when I was drilling that, it would have splintered quite a bit more and come out. So I'm about to drill the second hole now into the 2x4, and one thing you want to keep in mind is as you go down, as you start drilling down, you're going to feel it as if you stopped and you're not getting anywhere. What you want to do then is keep the drill going, but back it out to the top so that it'll pull up some of that excess material that you've drilled out and relieve that from inside the hole that you're drilling, and that'll make it so that your drill will catch and drill some more again. Okay, here I have a piece of 2x4 where I've drilled a hole that I did not back before I drilled the hole through, and you can see how it splinters out. So that's why you need to put a piece of wood underneath it as you drill through. It keeps it from splintering like this. For the top piece, across the top there where we're going to have the wire from the controller come out, you're going to have to cut a section out of the 2x4 so that you can slip that wire down in there. This is a hacksaw. I'm going to be using it for the 2x4s, and it's going to help me cut a section out of the 2x4 where I can slip the wire for the controller. Okay, right now I'm going to put a hole through the 2x4 right down into my plywood. Just line it up on this side, line it up on the back side. Just make sure it's kind of even across the edges here, and just put a hole straight down. Put it kind of centered. These screws for the plywood sheets are going to be kind of off to the side a little bit, so put this pretty much center. Okay, this is a 3/32 inch drill bit. This is what we're going to be using to drill down through the 2x4 into the plywood. Now, your drill bit might not be long enough to go all the way through the 2x4, through the plywood at the bottom here, with the 2x4 there as well. But the goal is really just to make a mark on the plywood so that you can go back and extend that hole a little bit further, because we're going to be putting the screws from the bottom of the plywood up into the 2x4. Okay, I'm just about to drill this hole in the 2x4. I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, now I'm going to put the one of these 1 1/4 inch drywall screws up through the bottom of this plywood through that hole. I'm using a clamp to hold it, but it's not really required. It just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, when I put this screw in, this slid a little bit. What you can do is you can put a lamp down at the bottom shining up, and you can look through this screw hole or this drill hole and find the point where you need to drill. This is one of the center pieces of 2x4 that I'm going to be using. I'm going to measure what half is, the half mark. That's 1 3/4, and I'm going to mark it. I'm going to mark it at several points and draw a line across. Okay, now I'm lining up these lines, and I'm going to just draw a nice straight line here and keep going down until I've made a line all the way across the whole 2x4. Okay, now I'm going to be measuring 11 inches from the very end here all the way up to wherever the 11 inches is.
Oh god, you can dub that over.
There. Okay, so now I have a line at 11 inches from the very edge of here. It's about the size of one panel. You see, it's the size from one edge to one edge of that panel. So that panel is going to need to bolt into this piece, but the next center panel is also going to need to bolt in here. So we've got half of this 2x4 for the bottom pieces and half of the 2x4 for the center piece. So we need to have this center line here right on the line for that first panel. Okay, when we line up these lines together, it'd help to actually have this line down the side so we can see it as we draw this one. So I'm just going to put my corner ruler here and use it to help me draw this line here, this edge. Okay, we've got the base of the pad pretty much there. Next thing we do is we're going to put the solid panels down onto the base. I haven't attached any of these panels yet, but I just placed them on top to give you an idea what it's going to look like after they're connected. To actually connect these, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these panels and inch down these a little bit just so that they're barely showing at the bottom here, and then place it back over where it's supposed to be, and then just give it a good press. And then once we've pressed it, you should see little marks on there where the screws line up, and then we'll drill there and then put the screws down. Okay, this is the panel, the same panel, this corner panel, and you can see here, can you see that, John?
Yeah.
Okay, you can see here that there's a little bit of an edge here for each of these screws where they're just a little bit out the bottom of the pad. And we're just going to take this panel, make sure it's oriented the right direction, and sit it over top and get it lined up the way we want it to be. And once we've got it all lined up, just going to give each corner a good press. Okay, now we lift it off, and we're going to have little points here. I don't know if you can see those. Can you see those?
Kind of.
Okay, well, we're going to have little points where the screws go. Now, we're going to get our 1/8 inch bit. Okay, now we're just going to drill those spots where we made those marks, making pilot holes for those screws. They don't have to go all the way down through the plywood, just enough for the screws. Okay, now we're going to take this panel, and we still have the edges of the screws out a little bit. We're going to put it back down over where we've made those holes, and we just want to find those holes so that the screws kind of sink down right into their places and you can feel it lock in there. Now we're just going to put those screws through. I want to back them up just a little bit, and then put it back in, put it back down, just to make sure that it gets in there nice and flush. Okay, now we have all the 5 panels bolted down to the base we made. It's pretty rugged, pretty secure.